calm day, this thing is really nice. Jeez, it doesn't want to land.
Oh, too far, yeah.
Oh no, I have to walk.
And we are back with another review. Today we have the Arrows Viper 50mm EDF. This is a gorgeous little plane that is available as a plug and play. You can get it with the gyro or without, and it's supposed to run on a 3S LiPo. But I've been running mine on 4S, and I actually have a lot to say about this plane, so let's get into it. Starting things off with the specs, we have a wingspan of 773.5 millimeters or 30.5 inches, 696 millimeters or 27.4 inches. Flying weight is about 470 grams. However, that's with the battery that they recommend for this plane. My plane is flying probably about 80 to 90, sometimes even 100 grams more than what it says here, and I'll explain all of that to you as we go through this review. Brushless motor is a 2627 4500 kV. Also has a wing loading specs and a wing area specs. It does come with a 30 amp ESC. Has 3 9-gram servos, and the recommended battery is a 1300 3S. But as I said, mine is flying a little bit heavier than this because I am actually running a 4S, and we'll get into that as we go through this review. So center of gravity on this guy is somewhere between 60 to 70 mil. I've got mine set pretty much at 70 mil from the leading edge of the wing. Now you want to measure that right from the apex of that turn there on the actual wing, and then you mark it out, and you can see I've got a little red dot on either side of my wing. I kind of like to fly this with a slightly aft CG. It flies really well, it's very maneuverable, and it comes into land really, really well. So as long as you follow that CG, don't make it too nose heavy because it does make it a little bit harder to launch as well, and it does make it a bit harder to flare. But if you push the CG back a little bit, it definitely changes the characteristics of the plane, and it flies really, really well. Don't go back too far though, because you know this is not a delta wing, so you don't want to go super tail heavy, but yeah, just don't have it too nose heavy either. Now when you get your Viper 50, it's not going to come fully assembled like this. You are going to need to put some of it together, but it's all very simple stuff. There's a little bit of gluing and 4 screws for the main wing. It's really nice and simple, and I'll run you through it real quick. So when you open up the box, you'll have the manual in there. There will be a little leaflet to kind of explain how the gyro works and how to set it all up and plug it all in, if of course you get the model with the gyro. And then on the second page, you have all your specs and everything there, and you've also got all the bits that come in the box. So you have the fuselage with the vertical stab molded in. You have your main wing, a couple of little winglets there to glue on, and the horizontal stab to glue on as well. These 4 screws are actually for the main wing that bolt on to the fuse. So really nice and simple. You glue on your little winglets just in there. I've actually used some hinge tape just to hold them in place and add a little bit of strength. You glue on your horizontal stab. The only trick here is just to make sure that it sits nice and straight. It's not crooked or anything like that. So just use your eyes and guidance as best as you can to make sure that this guy stays nice and straight and true. And then you just screw on the main wing when you've done all your wiring and everything else and plugged everything in. There's 4 screws that just bolt on, and you can see I've put a little bit of tape underneath the belly here just to protect the plane from scraping on the grass and the dirt from where I fly, because you can see the foam does get a little bit dirty and a bit grubby. And that's pretty much it. Assembly could not be easier. You'll have this thing together in minutes. Now for the setup on this, I'm actually going to be splitting this up into 2 sections. We're going to be talking about the aircraft first, and I'll show you all the mods and changes that I've done to it as I started putting it all together. And then we'll talk about the radio, and I'll show you my setup and dual rates and everything on there. So to give you a little bit of background on this, one of the guys at the field, Paul from BMS Web, he got one of these for Christmas, and I've seen him fly it around on 3S, and I really liked the way that this plane was handling. Now I do have the Viper 90, and I've also got the Viper 70. So obviously you know, the Viper 50 flies very similar to those, but in a much smaller scale. And I ended up finding one on Amazon for $176 Australian, and that was free shipping. This was, I think, late December, early Jan. And as a result of that, a few other guys at the club actually jumped on that deal. So I think we got like 5 or 6, maybe 6 planes like this that are, all the guys at the club have got themselves one. And they're all sort of doing the mods, you know, that I did to mine, because that's how you're going to get maximum performance out of this. Now, a couple of things to note, right? So the plane comes with a 30 amp ESC, which is this little guy right here. Okay, this allows you to run anything from a 2S to a 4S. So the specs say that you're supposed to be running a 3-cell, like 1300, maybe even a 1500 with this particular plane, and it will fly okay with the 3S. It is a bit slow, it lacks a bit of power and speed. You're not going to have a lot of vertical performance either. But if you just want to putt around and sort of get used to the aircraft, well, the 3S will be fine. However, you can also run this on 4S with this stock ESC, but there is a catch which we'll get to in just a second. The other thing that these planes come with, you can get them with the gyro or without the gyro. This happened to come with the gyro, and I actually did have full intentions of using this gyro when I was putting the plane together and setting it all up. But I quickly realized that the way that the gyro is positioned and all your wiring and everything, so this kind of sits next to the servo over here. And then you have all these like massive wires that you got to plug into a receiver, and there's just crap everywhere. And I just didn't like it in general. And the thing is that Paul, who had his, actually was enjoying flying with the gyro off more so than having the gyro on. He found that, you know, when the gyro was on, the plane felt like it was kind of half him controlling, half the plane controlling it. And that kind of led me to believe, you know what, I think I might just take the gyro off. And that's what I ended up doing. I never actually flew this plane with the gyro. The other thing was that he had mentioned that people were flying these on 4S. I thought, oh, okay, well, they just swap out the ESC and then run 4S. And he's like, no, they're actually using the stock ESC. So I'm like, interesting, because normally, you know, they would mention that you can run this on 4S as well with the stock ESC, but the manual doesn't say that. So we did an amp draw test, and this was pulling low 40s, low to mid 40 amps with the stock ESC, with the 30 amp stock ESC. I thought, okay, well, that's a bit risky. You know, you might not have cooking the ESC. So when I bought this and I was putting it together, I was like, I wonder what ESC is going to fit in here. And I actually had a couple. I had like a 40 amp, I had a 50 amp Skywalker V1, and then I realized that I had a 50 amp Skywalker V2 that I just bought, and I had it as a spare that was going to go into another aircraft. And the 50 amp Skywalker V2s are actually a little bit smaller. They have a slightly smaller footprint, so they're a bit shorter and a bit narrower. They're also a bit thinner as well. And they also come with reverse thrust. Not that it's applicable to this plane, but it's a nice little feature to have on those ESCs. Now, in order to fit it in here, I did have to cut out a little bit of foam on either side, which you can't really see on here very well, but there is a little bit of trimming that I did on the foam on either side. Very minor. You just squeeze that ESC as far back as it'll go, and then you'll actually see it through this hole here. It'll be sitting right in there where the other one used to sit, where the 30 amp used to sit. And then you just have to, you know, tie down your cables and everything, because the cables to the motor are actually a little bit longer. So you got to kind of just stick them down, otherwise they'll just pop up and they'll be in the way. So just make sure you put a bit of tape there when you're putting everything together. It's all accessible as well. Once the wing comes off, all of that is accessible. So I ripped out the gyro, installed my 50 amp ESC, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be running 4S. Am I going to be able to CG correctly? Now, originally, these things are supposed to run with the battery sitting somewhere here. To be honest with you, I don't recommend doing that. Like, don't use this as a guide to where your battery should be. Make sure you follow the CG markings that you put on the wings, because I think your battery should be sitting somewhere more here, like a 3S. For a 4S, I actually sit my batteries almost all the way back, and that is because before I actually glued this horizontal stab in, I actually cut out a little bit of foam on my fuse and a little bit of foam on the horizontal stab and fitted a lead weight on the back here to counter the heavier packs. Now, of course, you can get away with this without having to put tail weight. If you've already got one of these, you're just going to be running probably a bit slightly nose heavy, or you can instead of running 1500 4S like I'm running, you drop down to like a 1300 4S or maybe even 1000 4S. The thing is, you're just going to be running really short flight times. That's the only downside when you drop your milliamp like that. With this setup, I can run up to 2200 milliamp. So my batteries of choice with this particular model are these three here. I've got my CNHL 1500 milliamp, 120C, 100C, and I've also got these Zs. These I actually bought a little while ago last year, so 17th of the 8th. These I bought 18th of the 10th, so these were for my Eclipse and Cobra, so that I would actually, fly that 3D printed plane. And then I bought these ones just this year because they were 120C and they're only a few bucks more than these black ones off AliExpress. If I find the links, I'll put them in the video description if you want to get a good deal on these. And same with this. I think I bought these off eBay. There was like 50 bucks for two or something, or 45 bucks for two. So they're pretty cheap. And they give pretty good performance, but the Zs don't quite compare to the CNHL, I'll be honest with you. Now, I can run this on 2200 4S, like I said. These are my batteries of choice for the 2200s. They fit in here pretty well. This one's probably the best one because it's the lightest and smallest one out of the lot. I don't really see a huge difference in weight, but it's not going to give me the most performance because it's only 50C, but I do get much longer flight time. So I can get probably 5 to 6 minutes out of something like this. These ones give me a little bit better performance because obviously they're a higher C rating. Well, they're not, but this is a better quality pack and the date on there kind of gives that away. So this is a 5-year-old pack almost. And it's still no swelling, nothing. It still works perfectly fine. This one from 2020 still works pretty well, although I have noticed the internal resistance has gone up quite a bit on these. But these perform quite well in this plane. They're just a bit heavier, so even with the tail weight, it's going to be a little bit nose heavy. You just need to do a couple of clicks on the elevator and you should be okay to go. And that's pretty much how I've got this guy set up. I've ran my wiring all the way down the side here. You can see all my wiring down the side, and then I've got my receiver all the way up the front. I also had to add a couple of extensions on the ESC for the plug because otherwise it was going to be a little bit short. So when I put my 1500 milliamp 4S in here, for example, I usually put it about 5 mil away from, if I can get this plug out of the way, I usually put it about 5 mil away from that back wall. So probably just like that. You can see there's just a tiny little gap there. And then I can have my plug running down the side. This plugs in there like so. All right, and I have the wires just kind of on the other side of the servo horn there. And then the canopy that hasn't been modified or cut out or anything will close perfectly fine, just like that. And that's ready to go. And that CG is perfect. So that CG, the way I've got it at the moment, it's probably just on the back edge of these little dots, which is exactly how I like to fly it. So like I said, I'll probably fly more on the 70 to 75 millimeter CG marks. It's just how I like to fly this plane. I like a little bit more of an aft CG. Just makes it easier to launch. It has a very neutral performance inverted as well. The way that it's all done like this, and it just works. It's a really nice setup to go with the plane like this. And yeah, I've got a variety of batteries to go with. So let's move on to the radio and I'll show you what my settings on that are. So for my radio setup, I've got my timer set at 3 minutes as per normal. I usually get around about 4 to 4.5, even flying on a 1500. The only time I don't get those sorts of times is if I'm doing like massive speed passes, but just cruising around doing circuits, inverted passes, doing some nice pattern flying, cutting in some nice lines. You should be able to fetch 3.5 to 4 minutes quite easily, even on a 1500 milliamp. As far as my rates go, I've got this set up a little bit aggressive, so I will warn you that you can probably tone some of these down even just to start with. But like my rates for aileron are 80% on low, 90% on mid, and 100% on high. I fly this pretty much exclusively on low rates. I have flown it on mid before, and high is okay, but it is quite an aggressive little, like it can be quite a touchy little plane. So don't go too crazy unless you really like to have full throw on everything. Just tame it down a little bit. For my elevator, I've also got 70 on low, mid is 80, and then 90 on high. And there's no rudder on here, so that's just at 100 because there's no rudder. That's just how it is. I think I copied this model from another one. That's why the rudder's got a rate setting and a expo. All right, now, the only other thing I've done to this plane that's a little bit different from norm is I've actually got flaperons on here as well. Because I'm not using the gyro, I don't need the spare channel to set up any gyro settings. Because this is technically a 3-channel aeroplane. You have throttle, ailerons, and elevator. That's it. It's a bank and yank. There's no rudder. So you only need a 4-channel receiver, and then the spare channel would operate your gyro settings. Because I'm not using that, I was able to split the ailerons. So that's 1 channel each, 3 channels, 4 channels for the throttle. And that gives me the ability to go into flaperons. Now, I will say I don't use flaperons all that much. I did in the first few flights, but I found that I'm able to slow the plane down pretty well now. The only time I do like to use them is if I'm trying to float the plane. Like if I've got it nose into the wind and I'm trying to just float it a little bit, I'll go into like a stage 1 flaperon, and that gives me a little bit more lift, I guess. So this is how I've got it set up, and you can copy this if you want to do the same thing on yours. But we've got 45 and -12 on the elevator, and then 80 and -15. I will say I probably would even go less than that. I've probably got my full flap down a bit too much, because I found when I have it full flaps, yeah, you can slow the plane down a lot, but you actually lose quite a bit of roll control. And since this doesn't have rudder, if you're trying to correct the direction of the plane, it can get a little bit dicey. So stick with a low flap setting, or just tone down that full flap from 80, maybe go down to like 60 or something, because that's probably what I'm going to do as well. I just haven't, like I said, I don't use them much anymore, but I'm probably going to have to adjust that at some stage. And that's it. That's how I've got my plane set up, and that's how I've got my radio set up. So let's move on. Now I'm going to try and keep this as short and sweet as I possibly can, but I know that this is probably not going to be the case. I'm probably going to go on for a little bit. But based on the info that I've given you so far, the things that you need to do with this plane is basically add tail weight, swap out your ESC and get rid of the gyro, or just simply buy the one without the gyro. And the plane is set up and ready to go. No problems at all. You're going to absolutely love this thing. It is just a blast to fly. And it is a Viper through and through. It has very good flight characteristics. You can fly it relatively slow-ish. Don't go too slow because it can bite you, and I'll talk about that in a sec. And it has great speed performance overall. You can cut some really nice lines when you're doing your circuits. It unfortunately doesn't have a rudder. I have seen some people, cut out this rudder bit at the back here and install a little servo. And this is something that I may even explore in the future. If I get bored one day and I decide to just put a rudder on it, I might be able to do that. Given that I don't use the flaperons all that much, I can use that 4th channel for my rudder. And obviously it'll add a little bit of tail weight on there as well. As far as flight characteristics go, the only thing that you need to worry about is the stall on this plane, because it will drop a wing quite aggressively. So make sure that if you're going to test the stall on this, you're up a few mistakes high and test it out, because when it does stall, it will drop a wing quite aggressively. And I've been caught out a couple of times, unfortunately, mostly on landing. I've never actually stalled this plane during flight. It's only been when I'm coming down to land. So as you're coming in for a landing, you're going to get nice and parallel to the ground. And as you are about to flare and let the plane sort of touch down, don't pull back too much. If you pull back too much as you're getting slow, the plane will just drop that wing quite aggressively, and it has caught me out a couple of times. I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but these stickers here, these are not stock. These are stickers that I printed myself, and I've actually got a little bit of a bum nose It's got a little bit of damage from doing a couple of cartwheels that has caught me out. The last one, I actually broke this little winglet here, or just cracked it, and I had to glue that in. I've also got a couple of creases on this side of the horizontal stab. Thankfully, there's no actual damage to the stab itself, but I will say there's no carbon fiber in this horizontal stab, and I'm very tempted to actually put a couple of carbon fiber strips on here, maybe on the underside, just to stop it from flexing so much, because if you do pull back aggressively on the rudder, it can actually flex, even though it does have twin booms for the rudder, it can actually flex and cause the thing to roll a little bit as you're pulling up. So that's one thing that you need to be mindful of. Other than that, this thing flies absolutely amazing. It's a fantastic little plane. I take it to the field pretty much every time I go now. It just lives in my car when I go to the field. I always have a couple of batteries with me, and it doesn't matter if it's a calm day or a windy day. In fact, I like flying this mostly on windy days because it handles the wind so well. It is absolutely amazing what this plane can do when it's windy. It's one thing when it's calm and it's really nice to fly and it's smooth and it cuts these beautiful lines, but when it's windy, this plane, it's doing stuff that it shouldn't be doing given its size. Like, and I'm saying this in a positive way, because it's I don't know how to explain it. Like, I feel more confident flying this thing on windy days than I do my Viper 70 or Viper 90. 100%. This just handles the wind like an absolute champion, and when it's calm, it's just so nice to fly and just cut these beautiful lines, and it has this amazing sound with it as well. It's a must-have. Like, you have to have one of these in your fleet. I can't recommend this plane enough. It's absolutely fantastic. And that's going to wrap it up for this review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'm sorry if it's a little bit longer than what it should be for such a small aircraft, but I had so much info on this particular model that I needed to do a bit of an in-depth review with this. And between myself and Paul, we've tested so much of this aircraft that it wouldn't do it any justice if it were just going to be something really quick. So a detailed review like this, I think, is needed for these particular planes, and hopefully this has helped some of you out there. Whether you are new to this type of aircraft or the brand, or whether you've been sort of looking into it and wanting to get one yourself, now you've got a whole data sheet of everything that you need to know with the Viper 50mm from Arrows. Now, I know that Paul is going to be doing a video on his aircraft as well, and I'll put a link in the video description when that video goes up. But for now, I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to leave you now with some flight footage, and you also see a speed test that I did with it today, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that flight footage as well. Thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new. Don't forget to hit that like button before you go, and I'll be speaking to you all next time.
Climb out and roll over. It's very windy. Let's hover it a little.
Time remaining 2 minutes.
Alright, let's go again. I'm going to go out a bit deeper this time. Rolling over, pouring on the coals. Throttle off pass. I love it, it just hovers.
Time remaining 1 minute.
It's just sitting there. Alright, one more pass. We'll bring her in. Here we go.
30 seconds.
This thing's comedy. Alright, let's have a look. What do we got? Stop. Read. 189. That's funny. 189.
Motor on. Time start.
And she's away. Going up against the wind here. Going up. Fall over.
Sour. You still hear it in the wind, man. That's insane.
And then you go throttle off and just sit there. Just managing a little bit of forward momentum, because it will have a nasty tip stall if you're not careful. And we punch it. Going straight up again. Rolling over. And pouring on the coals. Full speed. Woo!
Time remaining 2 minutes.
Oh, we got 2 minutes to go. One more time.
It's bloody incredible. You did tell Paul that, didn't
I was supposed to be a secret.
you? Oh yeah. Yeah. We need to leave him way back after he comes out to do it. Play all his plans.
Hang on, I'm coming in for a landing, mate. Hold on.
Very nice.
Motor
That's about as good as we're gonna get with the conditions we have. All right, so that is absolute maximum speed now. 190. Officially 190. That's it.
It's gonna bug you now. You're only 10 off, mate.
Oh, I'll charge up another battery. We can go again. But 190. Last time was 189, so now 190.
You gotta check the paint, mate.
Check the paint.
Stickers are not coming off. It's a sexy paint. Oh yeah.